Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to episode 44 of Codename Kids Next Door, Operation CAKED F.O.U.R. We begin this episode at the Sector V treehouse, where we see Number 1 is holding a meeting with his teammates about the delightful children from down the lane's 4th birthday of the year. When Number 1 brings up that the delightful children's 4th birthday of the year is tomorrow, the rest of the Sector V operatives say that they won't be able to participate on this particular mission because tomorrow is also the day of Toobathon, a tubing race that is also an annual tradition for the town. Number 2 says that he will win this year's Toobathon with the help of his tube, which he calls Betsy. Number 4, however, acts rather dismissive towards Betsy and insists that he, Number 4, will be the winner with the help of his tube, which he calls Tubezilla. Number 5 and Number 3 also join in on this argument over who among the 4 of them will claim victory for this year's Toobathon. Suddenly, the treehouse's security system warns the Sector V operatives about an incoming projectile, and this projectile crashes into the control room of the treehouse. The projectile activates a hologram message from the delightful children, and the delightful children tell the Sector V operatives that the birthday cake will be the prize for winning Toobathon. In other words, the delightful children tell the Sector V operatives that if they want the birthday cake, they simply have to win Toobathon. And Number 1 accepts the challenge. He says that they'll share the birthday cake with everyone except the delightful children once they win. But Number 4 insists on having the birthday cake all to himself when he wins, which restarts Number 2, Number 3, Number 4, and Number 5's argument over who will be the winner for this year's Toobathon. The next day rolls around, and we see many kids, not just the Sector V operatives, have gathered together for Toobathon, and we also see parents have arrived too. Yes, the parents have come to not just watch Toobathon, but to also show their support for their respective kids. One of the kids is acting as a reporter for the event. His name is not revealed in this episode, but a later entry reveals his name to be Chip. So Chip proceeds to report on the events of Toobathon, and he thinks that Number 2, aka Hokey P. Gilligan Jr., is the only kid who isn't likely to win this year's Toobathon. And Number 2 overhears this, and he's not happy about this. Number 2 takes Chip's microphone and proceeds to give a speech about a phrase that his dad, Hokey P. Gilligan Sr., told him with regards to tubing. This phrase is farfic tubing. Number 2 then proceeds to go prepare for the race after this speech. But Chip still thinks that Number 2 doesn't have a chance of winning Toobathon. Number 2 goes to greet his teammates who are preparing their tubes for the race, and Number 5 admits that she doesn't understand why Number 2 doesn't create a technologically advanced tube for Toobathon, which is allowed. This leads to some of the Sector V operatives bringing up how Number 2 came in last place for all of the Toobathons that he participated in. Number 2 responds that his dad managed to win all of the Toobathons he participated in with Betsy, so Number 2 wishes to continue with that. Number 2 also admits that his desire to win isn't about the birthday cake, but rather about the spirit of farfic tubing. Soon enough, the kids all enter the water to begin the race. The delightful children take a chance to mock Number 2 before the race starts. And we soon see that the delightful children's tube is actually much bigger than first impressions would suggest. Most of the tube is underwater, but the delightful children reveal the entirety of their tube right before the race begins. The best way I can think to describe their tube is a giant battle boat, essentially. So after the Delightful Children reveal their battle boat tube, the race begins. During the race, number 2 has a brief silent encounter with the kid, or rather, the kid is the one who is silent. The kid simply acknowledges number 2 and then reveals that his tube is capable of flight. Number 2 is not impressed. He says number 2, could have easily made his blimp or his tube have flying techniques as well. Yes, number 2 says he could have easily built a flying tube too, but he wanted to go with Betsy for the sake of farfic tubing. We also see number 4 going through the race. Yes, number 4's tube, Tubezilla, is very big, probably the second biggest behind the Delightful Children's tube. And during the race, number 4 is able to knock away many of the competitors, but one competitor, a girl with a flower-printed tube, reveals that the flower markings on her tube are actually sharp blades, and she uses the sharp blades to puncture Tubezilla. So number 4 ends up in the water, and because he still is against swimming, number 4 ends up going onto an island, and now number 4 is stuck on this island. We also see number 1 is actually taking on the Delightful Children during the race. The Delightful Children's tube have many there are many laser guns on the battle boat part of the Delightful Children's tube, and they're trying to aim at number 1. But number 1 actually manages to climb aboard the battle boat, and he's able to dodge all the laser beams. He even manages to trick the laser beams into hitting the Delightful Children, which causes them to lose most of their hair. And the laser beams end up destroying the Delightful Children's battle boat part of their tube. So now the Delightful Children are out of the race, or they don't really stand a chance of winning in their current predicament. And with number 4, somehow number 4 managed to grow quite a beard during the time he was on the island, and he sees number 3 passing by and tries to call out to her to save him, but number 3 mishears number 4. She mishears number 4 requesting help to shave instead of save him, and number 3 mistakes number 4 for some old man. The kid then goes up to number 3, and he compliments number 3's tube and suggests that they exchange decorating tips after the race is over, much to number 4's dismay. And Chip, comments about number 4's predicament on the island, and he also comments about the Delightful Children being out of the race. But suddenly, the Delightful Children have smiles on their faces, and they pull out a walkie-talkie and tell someone on the other line that they're out of the race, but they're not upset about it. We see that the person they're talking to is none other than Father, who says that it's good to see that their plan is going forward. And Father says that he will prepare the birthday cake now, letting out an evil laugh and using a fireball to destroy a barrier, which causes more water to flow through. And this current of water interferes with the rest of the competitors for Toobathon. This current of water forces the Toobathon competitors to take a detour now. Number 2 hasn't quite caught up with the majority of the competitors just yet, and he's starting to have some doubts. But then he hears the voice of his dad, Hoagie P. Gilligan Sr., voiced by Jeff Bennett, who talks about farfic tubing and trusting trusting one's tube, and he inquires if his oldest son trusts Betsy, and number 2 says he does trust and believe in Betsy, and he now has newfound energy to continue the race. But soon enough, number 2 catches up with the other competitors just around the point when the new current of water causes them to take a detour. Tommy's tube is destroyed during the when the new current of water pushes the competitors into a different direction, and he doesn't feel too well. So between the 4 Sector V operatives still in the race and the kid, they're all playing. They're all essentially, it's like they're playing hot potato, but instead they're just like they're just placing Tommy. They're just throwing Tommy onto the others too, because they don't want Tommy to they don't want Tommy on their tube when he's not feeling well. But eventually during the event, number 2 ends up getting number 2 is separated from the rest of the competitors on a detour. Number 3 says goodbye to number 2 and comments about a new skate park, which confuses everyone else. So number 2 ends up getting caught in a whirlpool, and then he gets sent somewhere else when he gets sucked into this whirlpool. Meanwhile, though, we do see a sign regarding this skate park that number 3 was talking about, except it's not really a skate park. It's a giant cake pan, and Father is commenting about how the plan is almost coming together. Suddenly, a kid arrives with a skateboard. A kid arrives with a skateboard, and he inquires Father about if the skate park is open yet. Father actually tosses the kid into the cake pan, which is filled with cake batter already. And he says that he just needs some water and another ingredient to complete this cake. And we do see, yes, the current water flow that interrupted the race. It's heading for the giant cake pan, and and most of the competitors for Toobathon are in the water. So Father intends to create the cake with the majority of the Toobathon competitors in the cake. Eventually, we see that the whirlpool apparently took number 2 through a sewer pipe, because number 2 pops out of a sewer pipe just near the finish line for the Toobathon race. And number 2 is happy about how he may actually win Toobathon this year. But then Chip passes by, commenting how surprising it is that number 2 will win this year's Toobathon. And then Chip ends up bringing up about what happened to the other competitors. And he admits to number 2 when number 2 inquires him about it further, Chip does admit that Father has captured all the other competitors and intends to have the competitors be ingredients for the cake. Chip also tries to admit to number 2, Chip claims to number 2 that he didn't mean some of the things he said about number 2 earlier, and hopes to share the birthday cake with number 2. But number 2 actually decides not to cross the finish line. He decides to go back and help the other competitors, and he tells Chip that there's always next year with regards to Toobathon. But then Chip acts rather dismissive about number 2, calling him a loser in response. So with the kids and the water in the cake pan and the kids all trapped in the batter, Father is preparing to actually heat up the cake pan. But before he can actually do so, number 2 arrives, and number 2 ends up crashing into Father. Betsy also, a hole is punctured in Betsy as well, causing Betsy to deflate. Father doesn't seem too worried about seeing number 2 there, and he also recognizes Betsy. He comments about how Betsy was the tube that Hoagie Sr. used in Toobathon, and he acts rather dismissive towards number 2's dad, calling him a loser. But number 2 repeats what his dad had told him about how his dad, Hoagie Sr., had won Toobathon, all the Toobathons he participated in with Betsy. But Father scoffs at this, saying that Hoagie Sr. lost all of the Toobathons he participated in, and that Farfik tubing is just nonsense, is what Father says. But number 2 doesn't believe it. He insists that his father was a winner and that Betsy is a great tube. But Father still acts dismissive towards this, saying that Hoagie Sr. was just a pathetic loser and that Betsy is a pathetic tube. So Father proceeds to launch a fireball towards number 2. But number 2 number 2 reiterates that he believes in Betsy, and suddenly Betsy no longer is deflated, and Betsy reveals some technology. Yes, there's some technology within Betsy, and Betsy is able to deflect the fireball back at Father. Father ends up hitting the cake pan, which causes it to crack open, so the rest of the competitors are all freed, and they're all heading for the finish line now. And in the end, the winner of the Toobathon actually is, it's a tie, or a tie that's over 600 competitors. Yes, over 600 competitors tied for first place for this year's Toobathon. And Chip makes a point to, and Chip also decides to take another jab at number 2, saying how number 2 didn't win this year's Toobathon. Number 2 does arrive later on, seeing how the over 600 other competitors won. And when number 2 goes to see his mom and Tommy, Betty is happy that a Gilligan, Tommy, had won Toobathon, but number 2 mentioned about how their dad, Hoagie Sr., won all the Toobathons, but Mrs. Gilligan, Betty tells her son that his dad, her husband, had quite the imagination. She also brings up how Hoagie Sr. mentioned that Betsy would save all the kids participating in Toobathon one year. And number 2 is happy when he hears that his dad's prediction ended up being true. And number 2 insists on telling his mom about Farfik tubing, and Betty can only comment that Hoagie Jr. is very much the son of Hoagie Sr. Next up, number 1 admits to number 3 and number 5 that the cake batter actually tastes quite good, even though it ended up being a good thing that the cake wasn't made for obvious reasons. Number 3, though, feels bad that number 2 didn't get to win Toobathon this year, but number 5 points out that number 2 didn't come in last place this year. Then we cut to number 4, who's still stuck on the island, and he's pleading for help, and that's how we end this episode. So there you go. This was the second full episode of Season 4 of Codename Kids Next Door. It's also the CAKED entry for Season 4, and it stands out for being the first full episode of a CAKED entry. Yes, this CAKED entry was a full episode, while the first 3 were all segments. And yes, like I said before in previous CAKED entry recap and thoughts videos, yes, the Delightful Children have 5 birthdays in a single year. And it wasn't brought up in this episode. I might as well just bring it up now. The next CAKED entry, the one in Season 5, that's the one when they explicitly mention how the Delightful Children celebrate 5 birthdays in a single year. But yes, this CAKED entry also stands out not just for being a full episode, but it's also the first CAKED entry that Father participates in. And Father's plan this time around was to have the Toobathon competitors be ingredients in the birthday cake. That definitely made a lot of fans feel that Father and the Delightful Children, many would consider this plan to be one of, if not Father and the Delightful Children's most disturbing plan in the series. It definitely stood out to a lot of fans, to say the least. Now, this episode also stands out for going into greater detail about one of the parents of one of the Sector V operatives. Number 2 was the spotlight character for this particular entry, and the entry also focused on Hoagie P. Gilligan Sr. Now, we didn't actually get to see him in this entry, but we did get to hear his voice. And yes, I might as well bring it up now. There is a comics issue which actually does feature Hoagie P. Gilligan Sr. It's a flashback comic book entry. Yes, the comic book entry is a flashback to before number 2 joined the Kids Next Door. And although I should mention in the comics issue, Hoagie Sr.'s face isn't actually shown. His face is obscured, but we do get to see most of his design, but we don't get a clear look at his face. Now, although the entry does go into some detail about Hoagie Sr., we still don't know exactly what happened to Hoagie Sr. We still don't know why he isn't present in, well, the present day. And though I'm in the camp that suspects that Hoagie Sr. probably passed away at this point in time, I agree with that speculation. Especially because it does sound like, yeah, I'm in the camp that thinks that Hoagie Sr. passed away. That's my speculation anyway, and many fans also share that same speculation. But yes, I don't recall them ever explicitly stating what happened to Hoagie Sr. in the series itself, and I don't recall Tom Warburton ever giving an answer in one of his blog posts. Although Tom Warburton did comment on some of his blog posts that he always did like the idea behind this episode, how number 2 is such a tubing purist, that's how Tom Warburton describes number 2, that number 2 insists on using Betsy even though he could use a technologically advanced tube, and it's perfectly legal in Toobathon. And in one blog post, Tom Warburton did comment about how the executives requested that they tone down Father insulting number 2's dad. But Tom Warburton in this blog post commented that the staff and crew members were able to convince them to keep it the way it was because it was necessary for the story. And yeah, number 2 was proven right in the end. Betsy was a special tube after all, even though Father acted dismissive towards the tube and towards Hoagie Sr. But yes, it does also give us at least a little backstory for Father. He's familiar with a Sector V operative's parent. He does speak of Hoagie Sr. like he knew him in the past. And yes, Hoagie Sr. isn't the only Sector V operative parent that Father knows. A later entry reveals Father's history with another Sector V operative parent. I don't want to give away too much just yet for the sake of those just following along with these recap and thoughts videos, but you can be assured that it will be made clear. Yes, it will be clear which Sector V operative parent I'm referring to once we cover the recap and thoughts video for that particular entry. So otherwise, I guess oh, that's right, yes. While the Sector V operatives did participate in Toobathon, there were at least 2 other Kids Next Door operatives, 2 non-Sector V operatives who participated in Toobathon, number 65.3 and number 86. And yes, this entry is the entry where number 86's last name, Fulbright, is said out loud, or said within the series itself. So yes, CAKED F.O.U.R is the entry where number 86's last name is actually said on screen. And this entry also marks the introduction of Chip, who's a kid reporter. And I might as well bring it up now. Chip actually does have a partner when it comes to reporting on events. He didn't appear in this episode, the partner, or at least the partner didn't have a speaking role. Maybe he was in the background, but I didn't see the partner in the background when I rewatched this episode to prepare for the recap and thoughts video. But yes, at least Chip appeared, and you will get to meet Chip's partner in reporting events in time. So yes, this isn't the last that we've seen of Chip. Now, otherwise, the other detail... oh, that's right. Yes, the kid. Yes, let's bring that up. The kid makes his return in this episode, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe the kid's next appearance won't be until season 6. So that would mean the kid appears in even-numbered seasons. But yes, while the kid did encounter number 2 briefly, and the kid did acknowledge number 2 in reference to when he first appeared back in Operation Dogfight in Season 2, the kid actually also interacted with number 3, and, he didn't directly interact with number 4, but number 4 did see the kid interacting with number 3, and number 4 was not happy about that. Another hint for the fans of the Wally and Kooky pairing, or the Kooky and Wally pairing, the Wally and Kooky pairing, number 3 and number 4 pairing, whatever you want to call the pairing. Yes, there was another hint about that with number 4 not being happy about seeing the kid interacting with number 3. And yes, this does relate to the kid's next appearance. I might as well mention that much. In the kid's next appearance, or the one I'm thinking of anyway, the kid has another, the kid interacts with number 3 and number 4 again in that particular segment, which, could be seen as a reference to their interactions in this episode. And let's see, otherwise, that might actually be about it for this particular episode. Or actually, no, there is one more detail I can think of. Like, it was a small moment, but I thought it was a nice touch all the same, was number 1. When number 1 agreed to join Toobathon, because originally number 1 wasn't going to join Toobathon, but he agreed to join when the Delightful Children mentioned the cake being the prize for winning Toobathon. Number 1 was the one who made a point to say that they would share the birthday cake with everyone except the Delightful Children. And I thought that was pretty heartwarming, especially because number 1 might come off a bit more standoffish compared to some of his teammates, but it does show that he genuinely is a good guy who cares about other kids, and he cares about the mission of the kids next door. So I thought that was pretty heartwarming that number 1 was willing to share the birthday cake with other kids if he won the Toobathon. Again, it was a small detail, but it was still a heartwarming moment all the same for someone like number 1 who usually comes off being pretty standoffish. But otherwise, yes, I believe that's about it for this particular episode. So we got our Season 4 CAKED entry. Number 2 got to be the Spotlight character, and we did get to learn a little bit more about his dad, although exactly what happened to his dad is up to fan speculation at this point in time. Whether they'll go into greater detail in the sequel series, provided that it ever gets greenlit, I'm not sure. We'll just have to be patient and play the waiting game. And yes, Father got to play a role in a CAKED entry, and I might as well give this hint. This won't be the last CAKED entry that Father participates in. But otherwise, yes, I believe that's about it for this episode. So as of this video, we've now discussed episode 44 of Codename Kids Next Door on this channel. Take care, and until next time.